The crimson fervor of the Red Union besieged the bastion of the April 28th Brigade relentlessly for 48 hours. Their scarlet banners danced in the air like eager flames seeking kindling. The commander of the Red Union, seasoned by the tumultuous tides of the great proletarian cultural revolution, felt a tinge of unease amidst the fray, not due to the novice defenders they faced, but the lurking threat of a dozen hidden iron stoves, each laden with explosive fury, poised to erupt at the flick of a switch. The specter of annihilation loomed, imperceptible yet palpable, as if iron itself were drawn towards a magnetic demise. Atop the besieged edifice, a slender silhouette emerged, brandishing the colossal red standard of the April 28th Brigade. Her presence ignited a hail of gunfire, a cacophony of history's arsenal, from antiquated American carbines to Czech machine guns, Japanese rifles, PLA armaments pilfered post-August editorial, even ancestral Chinese dadao swords and spears, weaving a tapestry of conflicts past and present. This was not the first such defiance witnessed by the April 28th Brigade. Many a valiant soul had stood atop that precipice, rallying cries echoing through megaphones, scattering pamphlets like confetti amidst the storm of lead, and emerged unscathed, bathed in the glory of their courage. The young maiden, her belief in fortune's favor unyielding, joined this lineage of daring, poised to dance upon the razor's edge of fate. She danced with the battle standard as though wielding the blaze of her youth, trusting in the incinerating flames of revolution to reduce the enemy to ashes, envisioning the birth of an ideal world in the fervor coursing through her veins. Her mind intoxicated by the brilliance of her crimson dreams until a bullet pierced her chest. Her tender 15-year-old frame offered little resistance as the bullet sped through, its whistle fading into the air behind her. The young Red Guard tumbled, her flag descending alongside her, her delicate form falling like a reluctant bird from the sky. The Red Union warriors cheered triumphantly. Some hastened to the base of the building, tearing down the banner of the April 28th Brigade and seizing the slender, lifeless figure. They hoisted their trophy aloft, parading it momentarily before hurling it toward the apex of the compound's metal gate. Most of the gate's bars, once capped with sharp tips, had been repurposed as spears in the factional civil wars, but two remained, impaling the girl as they caught her. The Red Guards retreated, using the pierced body for target practice, bullets raining like a gentle shower upon her numb form. Her vine-like arms twitched sporadically, flicking off imaginary raindrops, until half of her young head was obliterated, leaving a single, haunting eye fixed upon the azure sky of 1967. No pain lingered in that gaze, only unyielding dedication and longing. Yet, compared to some, she was deemed fortunate, meeting her end in fervent sacrifice for an ideal. Such battles engulfed Beijing, each akin to a multitude of processors toiling in tandem, their collective output birthing the Cultural Revolution. Madness flooded the city, permeating every crevice and corner. On the outskirts, within the exercise grounds of Tsinghua University, a mass struggle session unfolded, attended by thousands, relentless in its quest to shame and dismantle the enemies of revolution through verbal and physical torment, until they confessed their sins before the masses. As the revolutionaries had splintered into numerous factions, opposing forces everywhere engaged in complex maneuvers and contests. Within the university, intense conflicts erupted between the Red Guards, the Cultural Revolution Working Group, the Workers' Propaganda Team, and the Military Propaganda Team, and each faction divided into new rebel groups from time to time, each based on different backgrounds and agendas, leading to even more ruthless fighting. But for this mass struggle session, the victims were the reactionary bourgeois academic authorities. These were the enemies of every faction, and they had no choice but to endure cruel attacks from every side. Compared to other monsters and demons, reactionary academic authorities were special. During the earliest struggle sessions, they had been both arrogant and stubborn. That was also the stage in which they had died in the largest numbers. Over a period of 40 days, in Beijing alone, more than 1,700 victims of struggle sessions were beaten to death. Many others picked an easier path to avoid the madness. Laoshe, Wuhan, Jianbozhan, Fulei, Zhaojiuzhang, Yikun, Wenji, Haimo, and other once respected intellectuals had all chosen to end their lives. Those who survived that initial period gradually became numb as the ruthless struggle sessions continued. The protective mental shell helped them avoid total breakdown. They often seemed to be half asleep during the sessions and would only startle awake when someone screamed in their faces to make them mechanically recite their confessions, already repeated countless times. Then, some of them entered a third stage. The constant, unceasing struggle sessions injected vivid political images into their consciousness like mercury, until their minds, erected upon knowledge and rationality, collapsed under the assault. They began to really believe that they were guilty, to see how they had harmed the great cause of the revolution. They cried, and their repentance was far deeper and more sincere than that of those monsters and demons who were not intellectuals. For the Red Guards, heaping abuse upon victims in those two latter mental stages was utterly boring. Only those monsters and demons who were still in the initial stage could give their overstimulated brains the thrill they craved, like the red cape of the matador. But such desirable victims had grown scarce. In Tsinghua there was probably only one left. Because he was so rare, he was reserved for the very end of the struggle session. Jin Zhetang had survived the Cultural Revolution so far, but he remained in the first mental stage. He refused to repent, to kill himself, or to become numb. When this physics professor walked onto the stage in front of the crowd, his expression clearly said, "Let the cross I bear be even heavier." The Red Guards did indeed have him carry a burden, but it wasn't a cross. Other victims wore tall hats made from bamboo frames, but his was welded from thick steel bars, and the plaque he wore around his neck wasn't wooden, like the others, but an iron door taken from a laboratory oven. His name was written on the door in striking black characters, and two red diagonals were drawn across them in a large X. Twice the number of Red Guards used for other victims escorted Jin onto the stage, 2 men and 4 women. The 2 young men strode with confidence and purpose, the very image of mature Bolshevik youths. They were both fourth-year students majoring in theoretical physics, and Jin was their professor. The women, really girls, were much younger, second-year students from the junior high school attached to the university. Dressed in military uniforms and equipped with bandoliers, they exuded youthful vigor and surrounded Jin Zhetang like 4 green flames. His appearance excited the crowd. The shouting of slogans, which had slackened a bit, now picked up with renewed force and drowned out everything else like a resurgent tide. After waiting patiently for the noise to subside, one of the male Red Guards turned to the victim. "Jin Zhetang, you are an expert in mechanics. You should see how strong the great unified force you're resisting is. To remain so stubborn will lead only to your death. Today, we will continue the agenda from the last time. There's no need to waste words. Answer the following question without your typical deceit. Between the years of 1962 and 1965, did you not decide on your own to add relativity to the intro physics course?" "Relativity is part of the fundamental theories of physics," Jin answered. "How can a basic survey course not teach it?" "You lie," a female Red Guard by his side shouted. "Einstein is a reactionary academic authority. He would serve any master who dangled money in front of him. He even went to the American imperialists and helped them build the atom bomb. To develop a revolutionary science, we must overthrow the black banner of capitalism represented by the theory of relativity." Jin remained silent, enduring the pain brought by the heavy iron hat and the iron plaque hanging from his neck. He had no energy to answer questions that were not worth answering. Behind him, one of his students also frowned. The girl who had spoken was the most intelligent of the 4 female Red Guards, and she was clearly prepared, as she had been seen memorizing the struggle session script before coming on stage. But against someone like Jin Zhetang, a few slogans like that were insufficient. The Red Guards decided to bring out the new weapon they had prepared against their teacher. One of them waved to someone off stage. Jin's wife, physics professor Xiao Mei, stood up from the crowd's front row. She walked onto the stage dressed in an ill-fitting green outfit, clearly intended to imitate the military uniform of the Red Guards. Those who knew her remembered that she had often taught class in an elegant kippah, and her current appearance felt forced and awkward. Jin Zhetang. She was clearly unused to such theater, and though she tried to make her voice louder, the effort magnified the tremors in it. You didn't think I would stand up and expose you, criticize you? Yes, in the past, I was fooled by you. You covered my eyes with your reactionary view of the world and science. But now I am awake and alert. With the help of the revolutionary youths, I want to stand on the side of the revolution, the side of the people. She turned to face the crowd. Comrades, revolutionary youths, revolutionary faculty, and staff, we must clearly understand the reactionary nature of Einstein's theory of relativity. This is most apparent in general relativity. Its static model of the universe negates the dynamic nature of matter. It is anti-dialectical. It treats the universe as limited, which is absolutely a form of reactionary idealism. As he listened to his wife's lecture, Jin allowed himself a wry smile. May, I fooled you? Indeed, in my heart, you've always been a mystery. One time I praised your genius to your father. He's lucky to have died early and escaped this catastrophe, and he shook his head, telling me that he did not think you would ever achieve much academically. What he said next turned out to be so important to the second half of my life. May is too smart. To work in fundamental theory, one must be stupid. In later years, I began to understand his words more and more. May, you truly are too smart. Even a few years ago, you could feel the political winds shifting in academia and prepared yourself. For example, when you taught, you changed the names of many physical laws and constants. Ohm's law you called resistance law. Maxwell's equations you called electromagnetic equations. Planck's constant you called the quantum constant. You explained to your students that all scientific accomplishments resulted from the wisdom of the working masses, and those capitalist academic authorities only stole these fruits and put their names on them. But even so, you couldn't be accepted by the revolutionary mainstream. Look at you now. You're not allowed to wear the red armband of the revolutionary faculty and staff. You had to come up here empty-handed, without the status to carry a little red book. You can't overcome the fault of being born to a prominent family in pre-revolutionary China and of having such famous scholars as parents. But you actually have more to confess about Einstein than I do. In the winter of 1922, Einstein visited Shanghai. Because your father spoke fluent German, he was asked to accompany Einstein on his tour. You told me many times that your father went into physics because of Einstein's encouragement, and you chose physics because of your father's influence. So, in a way, Einstein can be said to have indirectly been your teacher, and you once felt so proud and lucky to have such a connection. Later, I found out that your father had told you a white lie. He and Einstein had only one very brief conversation. The morning of November 13, 1922, he accompanied Einstein on a walk along Nanjing Road. Others who went on the walk included Yu Yuren, president of Shanghai University, and Cao Gubing, general manager of the newspaper Ta Kung Pao. When they passed a maintenance site in the roadbed, Einstein stopped next to a worker who was smashing stones and silently observed this boy with torn clothes and dirty face and hands. He asked your father how much the boy earned each day. After asking the boy, he told Einstein 5 cents. This was the only time he spoke with the great scientist who changed the world. There was no discussion of physics, of relativity, only cold, harsh reality. According to your father, Einstein stood there for a long time after hearing the answer, watching the boy's mechanical movements, not even bothering to smoke his pipe as the embers went out. After your father recounted this memory to me, he sighed and said, "In China, any idea that dared to take flight would only crash back to the ground. The gravity of reality is too strong. Lower your head," one of the male Red Guards shouted. This may actually have been a gesture of mercy from his former student. All victims being struggled against were supposed to lower their heads. If Jin did lower his head, the tall, heavy iron hat would fall off, and if he kept his head lowered, there would be no reason to put it back on him. But Jin refused and held his head high, supporting the heavy weight with his thin neck. "Lower your head, you stubborn reactionary." One of the girl Red Guards took off her belt and swung it at Jin. The copper belt buckle struck his forehead and left a clear impression that was quickly blurred by oozing blood. He swayed unsteadily for a few moments, then stood straight and firm again. One of the male Red Guards said, "When you taught quantum mechanics, you also mixed in many reactionary ideas." Then he nodded at Xiao Mei, indicating that she should continue. Xiao was happy to oblige. She had to keep on talking, otherwise her fragile mind, already hanging on only by a thin thread, would collapse completely. "Jin Zhetang, you cannot deny this charge. You have often lectured students on the reactionary Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. It is, after all, the explanation recognized to be most in line with experimental results." His tone, so calm and collected, surprised and frightened Xiao Mei. This explanation posits that external observation leads to the collapse of the quantum wave function. This is another expression of reactionary idealism, and it's indeed the most brazen expression. Should philosophy guide experiments, or should experiments guide philosophy? Jin's sudden counterattack shocked those leading the struggle session. For a moment they did not know what to do. Of course, it should be the correct philosophy of Marxism that guides scientific experiments, one of the male Red Guards finally said. Then that's equivalent to saying that the correct philosophy falls out of the sky. This is against the idea that the truth emerges from experience. It's counter to the principles of how Marxism seeks to understand nature. Xiao Mei and the two college student Red Guards had no answer for this. Unlike the Red Guards who were still in junior high school, they couldn't completely ignore logic. But the four junior high girls had their own revolutionary methods that they believed were invincible. The girl who had hit Jin before took out her belt and whipped Jin again. The other three girls also took off their belts to strike at Jin. With their companion displaying such revolutionary fervor, they had to display even more, or at least the same amount. The two male Red Guards didn't interfere. If they tried to intervene now, they would be suspected of being insufficiently revolutionary. "You also taught the Big Bang Theory. This is the most reactionary of all scientific theories." One of the male Red Guards spoke up, trying to change the subject. Maybe in the future this theory will be disproven. But two great cosmological discoveries of this century, Hubble's law, an observation of the cosmic microwave background, show that the Big Bang Theory is currently the most plausible explanation for the origin of the universe. "Lies!" Xiao Mei shouted. Then she began a long lecture about the Big Bang Theory, remembering to splice in insightful critiques of the theory's extremely reactionary nature. But the freshness of the theory attracted the most intelligent of the four girls, who couldn't help but ask, "Time began with the singularity? So what was there before the singularity?" "Nothing," Jin said, the way he would answer a question from any curious young person. He turned to look at the girl kindly. With his injuries and the tall iron hat, the motion was very difficult. "No, nothing? That's reactionary, completely reactionary," the frightened girl shouted. She turned to Xiao Mei, who gladly came to her aid. "The theory leaves open a place to be filled by God." Xiao nodded at the girl. The young Red Guard, confused by these new thoughts, finally found her footing. She raised her hand, still holding the belt, and pointed at Jin. You're trying to say that God exists? I don't know." "What?" "I'm saying, I don't know. If by God you mean some kind of superconsciousness outside the universe, I don't know if it exists or not. Science has given no evidence either way." Actually, in this nightmarish moment, Jin was leaning toward believing that God did not exist. This extremely reactionary statement caused a commotion in the crowd. Led by one of the Red Guards on stage, another tide of slogan shouting exploded. "Down with reactionary academic authority, Jin Zhetang. Down with all reactionary academic authorities. Down with all reactionary doctrines." Once the slogans died down, the girl shouted, "God does not exist. All religions are tools concocted by the ruling class to paralyze the spirit of the people." "That is a very one-sided view," Jin said calmly. The young Red Guard, embarrassed and angry, reached the conclusion that, against this dangerous enemy, all talk was useless. She picked up her belt and rushed at Jin, and her three companions followed. Jin was tall, and the four 14-year-olds had to swing their belts upward to reach his head, still held high. After a few strikes, The tall iron hat, which had protected him a little, fell off. The continuing barrage of strikes by the metal buckles finally made him fall down. The young Red Guards, encouraged by their success, became even more devoted to this glorious struggle. They were fighting for faith, for ideals. They were intoxicated by the bright light cast on them by history, proud of their own bravery. Well, guys, if you liked this video and want a particular HFY story, comment below with its title. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.